The metallic clang of a dropped wrench echoed through the concrete warehouse like a judge's gavel, sharp and final in the morning stillness. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Wyatt didn't flinch. She simply bent down, retrieved the tool from where it had rolled against her boot, and returned to her inventory clipboard. Her movements were economical, precise, the kind of efficiency that came from years of training most people in this building would never understand. It was 0730 hours at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, California. The equipment warehouse smelled like gun oil, cordite residue, and the peculiar staleness of a space that never quite aired out. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of weapons racks, ammunition crates, and tactical gear organized with obsessive precision. Wyatt had been here since 5:30, checking serial numbers against manifests, her coveralls marked with a simple patch reading Equipment Services in block letters. She was 32 years old, stood 5'4", weighed 128 pounds, and looked entirely unremarkable in her civilian contractor uniform. Dark brown hair pulled back in a tight bun, hazel eyes that tracked movement with unsettling focus, hands calloused in ways that didn't quite match her supposed job description. A scar on her left forearm, partially visible when her sleeve rode up, showed a shrapnel pattern anyone with combat experience would recognize. But nobody looked that closely at the contractor in coveralls. The morning inspection was scheduled for 0730. Wyatt heard them before she saw them. Boots on concrete, multiple sets, accompanied by the low rumble of voices that carried the particular cadence of men who believed they owned whatever space they occupied. She kept her eyes on her clipboard, pen moving steadily down the column of numbers. Commander Derek Holloway entered first. 6'1", 205 pounds, buzz cut going gray at the temples, ice blue eyes that swept the warehouse like he was conducting a threat assessment. 41 years old and carrying himself with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd spent 12 years as a SEAL and now held the executive officer position at Training Command. His Annapolis ring caught the light as he gestured broadly to the men following him. Behind Holloway came Senior Chief Petty Officer Brian Kozlowski. 5'10", 195 pounds of compressed aggression, shaved head gleaming under the fluorescence, thick neck covered in the lower edge of a tattoo that disappeared under his collar. 38 years old, 15 years as an operator, and bitter about being passed over for warrant officer. His nose had been broken at least twice and never properly set, giving his face a permanent scowl. Lieutenant Trevor Hammond brought up the rear with 3 other junior SEALs. Pretty boy features, styled brown hair, 6 feet of CrossFit physique wrapped in a uniform that somehow looked tailored despite being standard issue. 28 years old, 18 months out of buds, 0 combat deployments, and an expensive watch on his wrist that screamed trust fund kid playing soldier. He was filming the group on his phone, narrating something about real operator morning routine for whatever social media account he was building. 42 SEALs and instructors filed into the warehouse behind them. Quarterly combat gear inspection, standard procedure. Wyatt had the equipment manifests ready, organized by team and specialization, each item accounted for down to the last magazine spring. Holloway's eyes found her immediately. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or the particular brand of contempt some men reserved for women in spaces they considered theirs by birthright. "Morning, gentlemen," Holloway announced, voice carrying across the warehouse. "Let's make this quick and efficient. We've got actual training to conduct today." His gaze slid back to Wyatt. "Assuming our civilian support has everything organized properly." The emphasis on civilian carried weight. Separation, otherness. "You're not one of us." Wyatt said nothing. She walked to the first equipment station, placed the clipboard on the table, and stepped back to a position that might have looked casual to anyone not paying attention. But in the back corner of the warehouse, Master Chief Petty Officer Raymond Ortega was paying attention. 47 years old, 24 years in the teams, gray hair and weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. He stood 5'9", 170 pounds, walked with a slight limp from an IED in Fallujah, and recognized a combat-ready stance when he saw one. The way Wyatt held herself, weight distributed evenly, hands relaxed but positioned for immediate access to tools that could double as weapons, head on a swivel despite appearing focused on her clipboard. That wasn't how contractors stood. That was how operators stood in unsecured spaces. Ortega said nothing. He watched. Kozlovsky approached the equipment table, picked up an M4 carbine, checked the action with practiced ease. "This is what we're working with?" He glanced at Wyatt. "You know what this is, sweetheart." The endearment landed like an insult, which was exactly how he meant it. Wyatt's voice came out flat, professional, empty of emotion. M4A1 carbine with SOPMOD Block 2 configuration, Daniel Defense Rail System, ACOG Optic, Surefire Suppressor compatible. Serial number Delta Alpha 7723. Silence. Brief. Awkward. Hammond laughed first, breaking the tension. "Okay, so you can read the label. Very impressive." He raised his phone, panning across the warehouse. "This is what 70,000 taxpayer dollars a year gets you folks. Someone who can read equipment tags." More laughter. 40 men finding humor in the mockery, because it was easier than questioning it. Phones came out. Several operators started filming. The morning inspection was becoming entertainment. Holloway picked up a Glock 19 from the pistol rack, examined it with theatrical care. "Tell me something, Miss—" He made a show of looking at her name tape. "Wyatt. How long have you been working equipment services?" 11 months, sir." 11 months? And before that? Wyatt's jaw tightened, just slightly, just enough for Ortega to notice from 30 feet away. "Previous employment isn't relevant to current duties, sir." "Previous employment?" Holloway smiled, cold and sharp. "So mysterious. Let me guess. Retail? Food service? Maybe you were a gym receptionist." He looked back at his audience, playing to them. "I'm trying to figure out what qualifies someone to manage Tier 1 operational equipment without any military background." He didn't know. Ortega realized it with something like disbelief. Holloway genuinely didn't know who she was, which meant Admiral Kramer had compartmentalized the information, which meant Wyatt's presence here was classified enough that the training command executive officer hadn't been briefed. That was significant. Wyatt returned to her clipboard, pen moving. Equipment manifest shows 47 37 M4 variants, 18 MK18s, 12 HK416s, 8 MK13 sniper systems. I need serial verification on each weapon before I can clear this inspection. Redirecting to task, refusing engagement. It was exactly the wrong approach with men like Holloway. "I asked you a question." His voice dropped into command register, the tone that expected immediate compliance. When an officer addresses you, the appropriate response is a direct answer. So let's try again. What's your actual background? Wyatt looked up from her clipboard, met his eyes, held them for 3 seconds that stretched like minutes. "Equipment services, sir. That's what's on my badge." Hammond was definitely recording now. Phone up, capturing everything. "Yo, this is gold. Civilian contractor versus Commander Holloway. Place your bets." Kozlovsky stepped closer to Wyatt, using his size for intimidation. "Commander asked you a question. You got some kind of problem with authority?" "No, Senior Chief." "Then answer properly when addressed by an officer." "I did, Senior Chief." The temperature in the warehouse dropped. Holloway's face flushed, red creeping up from his collar. "You know what? New plan." He gestured broadly to the assembled SEALs. "Tomorrow, 1400 hours, right here, public demonstration. We're going to educate our civilian support on how real operators work. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe you'll realize you're out of your depth." He leaned forward, voice loud enough to carry. "And maybe you'll learn some respect." Laughter, approval, phones capturing every moment. Wyatt said absolutely nothing. She simply returned to her clipboard, recording serial numbers with mechanical precision, while 42 men treated her like a punchline. Only Ortega noticed the way her knuckles went white around the pen, the way her breathing stayed perfectly controlled, despite visible anger, the way she automatically clocked every exit, every weapon within reach, every potential threat in the room. He'd seen that behavioral pattern before, in Ramadi, in Kandahar, in the eyes of operators who'd learned to function in hostile territory by becoming ghosts. Ortega approached quietly while the others filed out, voices fading down the corridor. Wyatt didn't look up, but her body language shifted microscopically. Awareness of his presence, assessment, stand down when she recognized him as non-threat. "Ma'am," he said quietly, just that word, no question attached. Wyatt's hand stilled on the clipboard. "Master Chief, tomorrow's gonna be interesting. It'll be fine. You should walk away from this, request reassignment. Let me handle Holloway." Finally, she looked at him. Her eyes were older than 32, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "I can't walk away, Master Chief. I tried that already. Didn't take." Ortega nodded slowly. He understood. You could leave the teams, but the teams never quite left you. "Then permission to observe tomorrow's demonstration?" The smallest hint of a smile touched Wyatt's face, grim and without humor. "It's open to whoever wants to watch. Something tells me that'll be quite a crowd." "Probably." She returned to her manifest. Serial verifications complete. Everything's accounted for. Inspection passed. Ortega accepted the dismissal, turned to leave, stopped. "For what it's worth, ma'am, the way you held that wrench earlier, firm grip, knuckles aligned, elbows at efficient angles." He met her eyes. "That's not how civilians hold tools." Wyatt said nothing. "Uthin." Ortega walked away, limp pronounced in the morning cold, leaving her alone in a warehouse full of weapons she wasn't supposed to know how to use. She looked down at her hands. Calloused, scarred. Hands that had held rifles in 12 different countries, that had pulled wounded teammates from burning vehicles, that had killed 42 people in a single 14-hour period while protecting classified intelligence. Tomorrow at 1400 hours, everything was going to change. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that, but she was certain they weren't. The vandalism was crude but effective. Wyatt arrived at 0545 hours the next morning to find coffee dumped across her clipboard, the liquid pooled and dried into sticky brown residue that had warped the paper beneath. Her tools, which she'd organized by size and function the previous evening, were scattered across the workbench in deliberate chaos. Someone had drawn a stick figure on the whiteboard, labeled Equipment Girl, with an arrow surrounded by crude anatomical sketches that belonged in a middle school bathroom. She stood in the doorway for exactly 4 seconds, assessing. The coffee was cold, at least 6 hours old. The whiteboard marker still smelled fresh, maybe 2 hours. Different perpetrators or staged timing. Either way, the message was clear. Wyatt set down her bag, walked to the supply closet, retrieved cleaning solution and paper towels. She worked methodically, wiping down the clipboard first, then reorganizing tools into their proper configuration. The whiteboard took longer. 3 applications of solution before the marker finally lifted completely. By 0600 hours, the workspace looked exactly as it had before, like nothing had happened, like she hadn't noticed or didn't care. She was inventorying ammunition crates when the door banged open at 0615. Lieutenant Hammond entered first, flanked by 2 junior SEALs whose names Wyatt hadn't bothered learning. Both were around 25, both carried themselves with the uncertain aggression of men still trying to figure out what kind of operators they wanted to become. Hammond held an oversized energy drink, the kind with enough caffeine to constitute a controlled substance in some countries. He wore PT gear, fresh from morning workout, skin still flushed with exertion. "Oh, damn, didn't expect anyone here this early." The false surprise was theatrical, obvious. "We were just cutting through on the way to the range." The warehouse had 3 exits. The range was in the opposite direction from all of them. Wyatt said nothing. She marked a crate number on her new clipboard, moved to the next. "You clean up nice," Hammond continued, gesturing vaguely at the workspace. "Someone make a mess?" One of the junior SEALs snickered. The other looked uncomfortable, eyes sliding away. Hammond drifted closer, energy drink sweating condensation. He made a show of examining the equipment on the nearest table, leaning casually against the workbench. Too casually. His elbow caught the edge of Wyatt's clipboard, knocked it to the floor. The energy drink followed half a second later, exploding across her coveralls in a spray of artificial blue liquid and chemical sweetness. "Oh shit, my bad." Hammond's apology was as genuine as his earlier surprise. "These things are so slippery, you know." Wyatt looked down at her coveralls, now stained from chest to thigh with blue residue. Looked at Hammond. Back to her coveralls. Her expression never changed. She stepped back, hands loose at her sides. And that was when Kozlowski arrived with 4 more SEALs, like clockwork, like they'd been waiting for their cue. Senior Chief Kozlowski took up position near the main equipment racks, arms crossed, enjoying the show. 38 years old and mean in the way some operators got when they'd spent too long proving themselves and not long enough examining why. "Morning, boys," Kozlowski's voice carried across the warehouse. "What'd I miss?" "Just a little accident," Hammond said. "Equipment girl's gonna need a wardrobe change. 8 men now. Not quite an audience, but getting there." Wyatt counted them automatically, assessed threat levels, calculated exit routes. Old habits from places where hesitation meant death. "Hey, contractor." Kozlowski approached, stopped just inside her personal space. Close enough to intimidate, not quite close enough to justify a response. "I've been thinking about yesterday. You rattled off those weapon specs pretty smoothly. Makes me curious about your clearance level." "I have appropriate clearance from my position, Senior Chief." "That's not what I asked." He picked up an M4 from the nearby rack, checked the chamber with practiced ease. "See, civilian contractors working with NSW equipment need at minimum a secret clearance. But the way you talked yesterday, you sounded like someone with access to technical specifications that require higher authorization." Wyatt remained silent. Kozlowski was fishing, trying to find leverage. "So, here's what I'm thinking." He set the rifle down, picked up another, held it casually. "Either you've got clearance you shouldn't have, which means stolen valor or fraud. Or you don't have clearance, which means you're working outside your authorization. Either way, that's a problem. My credentials are on file with base security, Senior Chief. You're welcome to verify them through proper channels." Hammond laughed. "Proper channels? This girl loves her bureaucracy." One of the junior SEALs, the uncomfortable one, cleared his throat. "Senior Chief, maybe you shut up, Thompson." Kozlowski didn't even look at him. His eyes stayed locked on Wyatt. Adults are talking. Thompson went quiet. The other junior SEAL smirked at his discomfort. Kozlowski turned back to the equipment rack, made a show of examining an HK-416. His grip was deliberately loose, casual in the way that preceded accidents. The rifle slipped, tumbling toward the concrete floor. Wyatt's hand shot out before conscious thought, caught the weapon 6 inches from impact. One-handed, perfect form. Her grip automatically found the proper hold points. Fingers indexed along the receiver, thumb on the safety, trigger discipline absolute. The warehouse went silent. Catching a falling rifle wasn't impossible, but catching it with that specific grip, with that exact positioning, with zero fumbling or adjustment required, that kind of muscle memory only came from thousands of repetitions. That came from training most people in this room had spent months acquiring. Wyatt held the rifle for exactly 2 seconds, realized what she'd done, carefully set it on the table, stepped back, neutral posture. "Lucky catch." Hammond's voice carried forced casualness. "You play sports or something?" "Or something," Wyatt replied quietly. Kozlowski's eyes had narrowed. He was reassessing, recalculating. "Do that again?" "Senior Chief, pick up that rifle. Show me your hold. I need to finish inventory." That wasn't a request, contractor. Command voice now. Pick up the weapon. Wyatt hesitated 3 seconds. Compliance violated her orders to avoid confrontation. Refusal would escalate. No good options. She picked up the HK-416. Proper grip, muzzle awareness, finger off the trigger. Textbook perfect form that belonged to someone who'd done this 10,000 times in environments where mistakes meant casualties. Huh. Kozlovsky circled her slowly. Where'd you learn that? Basic safety handling, Senior Chief. Basic safety handling. He stopped in front of her. Okay, identify the weapons on this table. All of them. Wyatt set down the HK-416. Looked at the spread of rifles and pistols Kozlovsky indicated. HK-416 with 10.4-inch barrel, Elcan Spectre DR 1-4 optic, KAC suppressor. MK-18 CQBR with Aimpoint Micro T2, Surefire SOCOM suppressor. MK-13 Mod 7 sniper system, Schmidt & Bender 3-20 scope, Accuracy International chassis. Glock 19 Generation 5 with Ameriglow sights, SIG M18 with Romeo M7 optic. She paused, then added, HK-416 National Stock Number 1005015807148. MK-18 National Stock Number 1005015270589. MK-13 National Stock Number 1005095938007. Complete silence. NSN numbers weren't printed on weapons. They were in supply databases, technical manuals, classified documentation. Civilians shouldn't know them. Contractors definitely shouldn't recite them from memory. Thompson looked genuinely worried now. Senior Chief, maybe we should. Field strip that HK-416. Kozlovsky's voice had gone flat, dangerous. Now. Wyatt's jaw tightened microscopically. Senior Chief, I don't care what you think. Field strip the weapon. I'm not authorized to. Consider yourself authorized. Do it. The room had filled while they'd been focused on Wyatt. 10 men now, watching, phones out. This had gone from harassment to something else entirely. Something that would have consequences regardless of how it resolved. Wyatt picked up the HK-416, removed the magazine, checked the chamber, ensured clear, pushed the takedown pens, separated upper and lower receivers, removed bolt carrier group, charging handle, buffer assembly. 17 seconds elapsed. She set the components on the table in proper order, stepped back. Blindfolded. Hammond had moved closer, energy drink forgotten. Do it blindfolded. That's not... You heard the man. Kozlovsky pulled a black equipment strap from a nearby shelf. Unless you can't actually do it and just got lucky. Wyatt looked at the door. Master Chief Ortega stood there, just arrived, taking in the scene with the quiet intensity of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. He met her eyes, gave the smallest shake of his head. Don't. But they'd backed her into a corner. Refusal now would invite worse escalation. The medical order said avoid confrontation, but sometimes confrontation found you anyway. Wyatt took the blindfold, tied it herself, properly, no gaps, reached for the disassembled HK-416, found each piece by touch alone. Her hands moved with absolute certainty, muscle memory built in places where reassembling weapons in darkness meant survival. Upper receiver made it to lower, pins aligned and pushed through. Bolt carrier group inserted, charging handle locked, buffer assembly installed. Function check performed by sound and touch. 14.3 seconds. She removed the blindfold, set down the completed weapon, met Kozlovsky's eyes. He looked like he'd been punched in the chest. What the hell? Are you? Hammond's voice cracked slightly. The video was still recording. Before Wyatt could answer, Ortega's voice cut across the warehouse. What's happening here, Senior Chief? Kozlovsky spun, trying to reassert authority. Just verifying contractor competency, Master Chief. By having her field strip weapons blindfolded at 0630 hours? Ortega's tone could have frozen nitrogen. That's an interesting interpretation of equipment inventory protocol. She volunteered. Did she? Ortega looked at Wyatt. Ma'am, did you volunteer for this demonstration? The ma'am hung in the air, significant and dangerous. Ortega had just addressed her with an honorific reserved for officers. Several operators noticed, exchanged glances. Wyatt chose her words carefully. I was complying with requests from senior personnel, Master Chief. Requests? Ortega nodded slowly. Well, those requests are concluded. All of you have PT formation in 15 minutes. Suggest you stop playing with equipment and start moving. The group dispersed slowly, reluctantly. Hammond still filming. Thompson looking relieved. Kozlovsky staring at Wyatt like she'd just sprouted a second head. When they'd gone, Ortega approached quietly. The scheduled demonstration is at 1400 hours, ma'am. 6 hours from now. 60+ personnel already planning to attend. After what just happened, that number's going to double. I know. Commander Holloway's going to push harder than these boys did. I know that, too. You could still request reassignment, transfer to different facility. Medical orders would support it. Wyatt looked at the HK-416 on the table. Thought about 14 hours in Helmand Province. Thought about 7 names she recited every night before sleep. Thought about the choice between hiding forever and facing one more firefight, even if this one didn't involve bullets. No, Master Chief, I'm done running. Ortega studied her for a long moment, finally nodded. Then I'll make sure proper safety protocols are in place for this afternoon. And ma'am, whatever happens at 1400 hours, you've got at least one witness who knows exactly what he's seeing. He left her alone in the warehouse, surrounded by weapons that knew her better than any person in this building, preparing for a confrontation that would end one of 2 ways. Either they'd learn who she really was, or she'd lose everything she'd been trying to rebuild for the past 11 months. At 1400 hours, the choice would be made. The outdoor range at 1400 hours looked like a small military convention. 68 personnel by Wyatt's count, and more arriving every minute. SEALs, instructors, support staff, even a few admin officers who'd heard rumors and wanted to see the show. Half of them held phones, already recording, waiting for the civilian contractor to humiliate herself in front of people who'd earned their tridents through 6 months of the hardest training the military offered. Holloway stood at the center of it all, orchestrating the spectacle with the confidence of someone who'd already won. He'd set up equipment tables with theatrical precision, 3 different rifle platforms, 2 pistols, a training course marked with cones and barriers. Everything positioned for maximum visibility to the growing crowd. Wyatt arrived exactly on time, still wearing the coveralls stained blue from Hammond's energy drink. She'd been offered clean ones, had declined. The stains were evidence. Evidence mattered. Holloway's smile was sharp. Sharp enough to cut glass. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. He gestured broadly to the assembled crowd. Gentlemen and ladies, nodding to 3 female admin personnel, thank you for joining us. Today we're conducting an educational demonstration. Our civilian support is going to learn firsthand what real operator-level competency looks like. Scattered laughter. Kozlovsky stood near the equipment tables, arms crossed, watching Wyatt with an expression halfway between suspicion and anticipation. Hammond was filming from 3 different angles, phone in one hand, borrowing someone's tablet for a second perspective. Lieutenant Thompson stood at the back of the crowd, looking deeply uncomfortable. Master Chief Ortega positioned himself near the ammunition supply, face carved from stone, giving nothing away. So, Here's how this works, Holloway continued. Standard NSW qualification course. Pistol engagement at 50 meters, rifle transition, malfunction clearance, moving targets. Nothing fancy, just the basics any operator can do in their sleep. He turned to Wyatt. You'll use the equipment as provided. No modifications, no special accommodation. Think you can handle that? Wyatt's voice came out flat, empty of emotion. Yes, sir. Outstanding. Holloway walked to the equipment table, selected a Glock 19. He made a show of checking it, nodding approvingly, then set it down. What he didn't show the crowd was the worn extractor spring, the slightly loose trigger pin, the magazine with feed lips filed just irregular enough to cause occasional malfunctions. Wyatt saw it all in the 3 seconds she had to inspect the weapon. The Mk18 carbine he assigned her had an optic that was visibly canted, misaligned by at least 2 degrees. To an untrained eye, it looked fine. To someone who'd spent 12 years trusting their life to precise equipment, it was sabotage. Holloway wasn't trying to make her look incompetent. He was trying to make her fail, dangerously, publicly, in a way that would justify removing her from the facility entirely. Course rules are simple, Holloway announced. Pistol table, 15 rounds, 50-meter targets, 4 seconds per engagement. Then transition to rifle, 8 targets at 100 meters with moving elements. 3 staged malfunctions will be introduced. Qualification standard is 90 seconds total time, 70% accuracy. He paused for effect. SEAL standard is 60 seconds, 90% accuracy. The crowd murmured appreciatively. A few operators called out encouragement to Holloway, treating this like a sporting event. Wyatt picked up the Glock 19, press-checked it, felt the loose extractor immediately. She looked at Holloway. "Sir, this weapon has mechanical issues." "Really?" Holloway took it back, performed an exaggerated inspection. "Looks fine to me. Maybe you're just not familiar with how a service pistol feels. The extractor spring tension is insufficient and the trigger pin has excessive lateral movement." Silence. That wasn't information a civilian should possess. Holloway's smile tightened. "If you're uncomfortable with standard equipment, you're welcome to withdraw." The trap was elegant. Refuse the sabotaged equipment and look incompetent. Use it and fail publicly. Either way, she lost. Wyatt took the Glock back. "I'll use it as provided." "Excellent." Holloway stepped back. "Range is hot. Commence on your signal." Wyatt moved to the firing line, crowd noise fading into background static. She'd done this drill hundreds of times in places where targets shot back. Worn equipment, suboptimal conditions, stress that made this theatrical demonstration look like a kindergarten recital. Her hands found the Glock's grip, compensating automatically for the mechanical issues. She'd qualified expert with worse weapons in worse circumstances. "Ready," she said quietly. "Begin." The Glock came up. Sight picture acquired. First round broke. 50 meters out, the steel target rang. Second target, sight realignment, trigger press, hit. Her hands worked through the worn mechanism, managing the loose trigger pin, compensating for feed angle issues. 15 rounds, 15 impacts, center mass grouping that would make a sniper instructor nod appreciatively. 4.2 seconds elapsed. The crowd had gone quiet. 50-meter pistol accuracy was difficult. Doing it in 4 seconds with substandard equipment was something else entirely. Kozlowski's face had lost color. Hammond's phone was still recording, but his expression suggested he was regretting that choice. Transition to rifle. Holloway's voice had lost some confidence. Wyatt picked up the Mk18, immediately identified the canted optic. Without hesitation, she flipped down the backup iron sights, ignored the mounted optic entirely. Combat adaptation. Use what works, discard what doesn't. The rifle felt like coming home. The weight, the balance, the familiar geometry of a weapon system she'd carried in 12 countries. Her body remembered what her mind tried to forget. 8 targets at 100 meters, 3 moving on automated lateral tracks. In the pit of her stomach, something cold and familiar woke up. The part of her that had killed 42 people in 14 hours. The part that medical officers said needed more therapy, more time, more healing. The part that never really slept. First target, iron sight alignment, trigger press, hit. Second target, moving left, lead calculation automatic, fire, impact. Third target static, controlled pair, both rounds center mass. The rifle's recoil was meditation, familiar rhythm, muscle memory carved into her nervous system at a level below conscious thought. Target 4, 5, 6. Each engagement faster than the last. Her breathing stayed controlled, heart rate steady, the chaos calm of combat that felt more natural than peace ever had. Kozlowski triggered the first malfunction remotely. Stovepipe, a round jammed at 45 degrees. Wyatt's hands moved before thought. Tap, rack, assess. Cleared in under 2 seconds. Back on target. Target 7 was moving right. Fast lateral movement. She led it perfectly. Fired. The steel rang. Second malfunction, double feed. More complex. Required magazine strip. Chamber clear. Reload. Her hands were a blur. Mechanical precision born from drills repeated until they became automatic. 4 seconds. Weapon hot again. Final target was further back. Partial exposure behind a barrier. She put 2 rounds through the exposed section. Tight group that would have been lethal hits on a human target. Third malfunction. Failure to fire. Dead trigger. She performed immediate action drill. Tap, rack, assess. Weapon back in battery. Engagement complete. The range timer showed 47.3 seconds. SEAL qualification standard was 90 seconds. The silence stretched like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. 68 people stood frozen, phones still recording, watching a woman in stained coveralls do something that should have been impossible. Holloway found his phone. Lucky shooting, but rifle accuracy at 100 meters isn't exactly advanced. His tone carried forced dismissal, but his eyes showed fear. He'd seen what everyone saw. That wasn't luck. That was training at a level that took years to acquire. Long-range engagement, then. Kozlowski's voice was tight, angry. He was doubling down, raising stakes. MK-13 sniper system, 800 meters. Let's see if contractor training covers that. 800 meters was extreme distance. It required ballistics calculation, environmental assessment, wind reading. It required training that civilian contractors absolutely did not receive. Master Chief Ortega stepped forward. Senior Chief, that's outside the scope of... She's been running her mouth about equipment specs, Kozlowski interrupted. Let's see if she can actually use it. The MK-13 was already set up on a tripod, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, scope calibrated. Kozlowski clearly had this planned as a backup humiliation if the first course failed. Wyatt approached the rifle, mind already calculating. Temperature 68 degrees, humidity 73%, wind 7 miles per hour left to right. Elevation adjustment required 12.5 MOA. She spoke aloud without meaning to, combat habit from spotting teammates. Wind 7 left to right, temp 68, humidity 73, elevation 12.5 MOA. Kozlowski went pale. How did you... Wyatt didn't answer. She settled behind the rifle, body position automatic. Cheek weld on the stock, eye relief perfect through the Schmidt and Bender scope, breathing pattern controlled. Her finger found the trigger, proper pressure distribution, squeeze, not pull. The calculations were already complete in her head. She'd made this shot before, in Helmand Province, at 830 meters, with 3 broken ribs and blood in her left eye. This was easy by comparison. Target Alpha, center, she said quietly. Send it. The MK-13 barked, recoil absorbed through proper form. 800 meters downrange, the steel target rang clear and loud in the afternoon air. She cycled the bolt, chambered another round. Target Bravo, left. Second shot, second impact. Target Charlie, right, third shot. Third impact. Tight group, all within the kill zone, at a distance most operators couldn't reliably engage without extensive preparation. The crowd had gone from silence to something beyond silence. This was awe mixed with confusion, mixed with growing realization that something was very, very wrong with their understanding of who this woman was. Thompson moved to a spotting scope, checked the target, looked back at the crowd. All 3 rounds center mass, 800-meter group you could cover with a fist. Hammond had stopped recording. His face was the color of old paper. Holloway stood frozen, trapped between doubling down and backing away. His entire demonstration collapsing around him like a controlled demolition. And in the back of the crowd, a junior SEAL who'd deployed to Afghanistan 2 years ago was staring at Wyatt's forearm, where her sleeve had ridden up during the shooting position, exposing the full pattern of her shrapnel scar. "Holy shit," he whispered to the operator next to him. "That's a helmet blast pattern. I saw those on task force personnel. That's not civilian equipment accident scarring." The whisper spread like wildfire. Operators looking closer, seeing details they'd missed. The way she moved, the way she held weapons, the knowledge. Edge she possessed. Another voice from the crowd, a DevGru operator who transferred to Training Command 6 months ago. That shooting style, the position, the breathing pattern, that's not SEAL team training. His voice dropped to horrified understanding. That's development group technique. Ortega's expression never changed, but something in his eyes said he'd been waiting for this moment since yesterday morning. Holloway's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I want to see credentials, right now. I want security to verify." "That won't be necessary, Commander." The new voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Rear Admiral Patricia Kramer had arrived, flanked by a JAG officer and 2 security personnel, and her expression suggested that someone was about to have a very bad afternoon. It just wasn't going to be Wyatt. Rear Admiral Patricia Kramer was 51 years old, 5'6", and carried herself with the kind of authority that made grown men stand straighter without conscious thought. Salt and pepper hair in regulation style, sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing, uniform pressed to knife edges. She'd flown rescue helicopters in 3 conflicts before transitioning to NSW oversight, and she had exactly 0 patience for the kind of stupidity she was currently witnessing. The crowd parted automatically as she approached, operators moving aside like water around a ship's bow. Her security detail flanked her, expressions professionally neutral. The JAG officer, a commander whose name tape read Morrison, carried a tablet and wore the particular expression of someone who'd been reviewing regulations at high speed for the past 30 minutes. Holloway recovered first, snapping to attention. "Admiral, I wasn't informed you'd be conducting an inspection today." "That's generally how surprise inspections work, Commander." Kramer's tone could have etched steel. Her eyes swept the range, taking in the equipment tables, the crowd of recording phones, Wyatt standing beside the Mk-13 with the careful stillness of someone waiting for an explosion. "Someone want to explain why I'm receiving notifications from base security about an incident involving unauthorized weapons demonstrations." The silence was absolute. 68 people holding their breath. Holloway found his voice, tried to control the narrative. "Admiral, we were conducting a routine training evaluation. One of our civilian contractors has been making claims about equipment knowledge that seemed inconsistent with her background. I felt it necessary to verify competency for security purposes." Security purposes. Kramer's gaze shifted to the equipment tables, to the obviously sabotaged Glock, to the Mk-18 with its canted optic. By providing substandard equipment and staging a public demonstration? She looked at the crowd. With at least 40 recording devices present, in direct violation of base photography regulations? Hammond's phone disappeared into his pocket so fast it was almost magic. Others followed, a ripple of suddenly empty hands. Kramer turned to Wyatt. "And you are?" "Jay Wyatt, Equipment Services, ma'am." Her voice was steady, professional, empty of emotion. Jay Wyatt. Kramer's eyes narrowed fractionally.
Your security credentials, please. Wyatt produced her contractor badge from a coverall pocket, handed it over. Kramer examined it briefly, passed it to the JAG officer. Morrison pulled out his tablet, began typing with the focused intensity of someone accessing databases that required multiple authentication.
Authentication levels. Kozlowski stepped forward, emboldened by Holloway's presence. Admiral, with respect, this contractor has demonstrated knowledge of classified weapon specifications, has claimed technical expertise beyond her authorization level, and just performed shooting that suggests training she shouldn't possess. He gestured to Wyatt. I'm formally requesting a full background investigation for potential stolen valor or security breach. Are you? Kramer's tone was flat, dangerous. Senior Chief, when exactly did you become the authority on who possesses what training? Ma'am, I just think I didn't ask what you think. I asked about your authority. She turned to Morrison. Commander, what does the preliminary search show? Morrison looked up from his tablet, face carefully neutral. Basic contractor credentials check out, standard secret clearance, properly documented, authorized for equipment maintenance and inventory. He paused, finger scrolling. However, there are additional flags in the system. Flags? Holloway seized on it. You see, I knew something was wrong. She's been lying about the flags indicate elevated clearance levels requiring command verification, TSSCI compartmented access, multiple special access programs. Clearance level requires 06 or higher authorization to view details. The crowd stirred. TSSCI was top-secret, sensitive, compartmented information, the kind of clearance that took years to acquire and presidential authorization to grant. Contractors didn't have it, certainly not contractors working equipment inventory. Hammond's voice was weak, uncertain. That has to be a mistake, or fraud, right? Kramer looked at Wyatt, expression unreadable. Miss Wyatt, do you have anything to say about these clearance discrepancies? Wyatt's posture never changed. Ma'am, I'm not authorized to discuss my previous employment without proper clearance levels present. Previous employment? Holloway latched onto it desperately. So you admit you're not actually a contractor? You're impersonating? I'm currently assigned to equipment services under medical administrative review, sir. Wyatt's voice remained flat, but something behind her eyes had gone very cold. My assignment is properly documented through command channels. If those channels excluded certain personnel, that was a command decision above my authority. The implication hit Holloway like a physical blow. He'd been deliberately excluded from the briefing loop by someone senior enough to make that exclusion stick. Kramer's expression confirmed it without words. The DevGru operator who'd recognized the shooting technique pushed forward slightly. Admiral, permission to speak. Granted. Ma'am, that rifle technique she just demonstrated, the position, the breathing pattern, the environmental calculation she performed aloud, that's not standard SEAL team training. He looked directly at Wyatt. That's development group methodology. Tier 1 operator technique. Another operator, older, with more ribbons on his dress uniform visible in a photo ID hanging from his belt, added quietly, the shrapnel scarring on her left forearm? That's Helmand Province blast pattern, ma'am. I saw it on task force personnel in 2023. Specific fragmentation signature from Taliban IEDs used in that region. The crowd shifted, realization spreading like chemical fire. Pieces connecting, impossible conclusions becoming less impossible. Kozlowski looked like he'd been gut-punched. That's not. Women weren't in DevGru in 2023. That's not possible. Actually, Ortega's voice cut in, quiet, but carrying absolute authority. Women have been in NSW since 2016, Senior Chief, and in Tier 1 selection pipeline since 2019. Maybe you should update your information sources. Thompson, standing at the back, had gone pale. Oh God, Operation Silent Thunder. That was 2023, Helmand Province. The entire team, except one operator who... He stopped, looked at Wyatt with growing horror. Ghost 6. The operator call sign was Ghost 6. The name hit the crowd like a grenade. Ghost 6 was legend, the kind of story that spread through special operations communities in whispers. The operator who'd held a defensive position alone for 14 hours against 200 hostiles, who'd lost their entire team, who'd killed 42 confirmed enemy combatants while wounded and protecting classified intelligence. Most operators assumed Ghost 6 was dead or medically retired to some classified facility. No one had considered Ghost 6 might be a woman working equipment inventory at Coronado. Hammond's recording tablet slipped from nerveless fingers, clattered on concrete. Holy shit, we've been harassing. He couldn't finish the sentence. Holloway rallied, desperate now. This is speculation, rumors. I want DNA verification, biometric confirmation, official documentation. He turned to Kramer. Ma'am, request permission to contact NCIs for immediate investigation into potential impersonation of military personnel. Kramer studied him for a long moment. You want to involve NCIs? Yes, ma'am, for security purposes. For security purposes, Kramer repeated slowly. She looked at Morrison. Commander, what's the protocol for verifying compartmented personnel identities? Morrison was already typing. Biometric verification through JPAS, ma'am, Joint Personnel Adjudication System, requires secure connection and approximately 15 minutes for full authentication. Then do it. Kramer's gaze swept the crowd. Everyone not directly involved in this incident dismissed. Anyone caught with recording devices will face Article 92 charges for violating base security protocols. Move. The crowd thinned by half, operators scrambling away from potential charges. Those who remained were senior personnel, people whose clearances allowed presence at sensitive incidents. 40 men and women standing in the afternoon sun, waiting for verification that would either vindicate Holloway or destroy him. Wyatt stood motionless beside the Mk-13, face carved from stone, while Morrison worked through authentication protocols on his tablet. She'd been still before, but now she had the absolute frozen quality of someone disassociating, pulling deep inside themselves to a place where external chaos couldn't reach. Ortega recognized it. Combat personnel protecting their mental space during overwhelming situations. He'd done it himself in Fallujah, in Ramadi, in a dozen firefights where staying present meant losing your mind. Ma'am, he said quietly to Kramer, request permission to ensure proper hydration for personnel during verification wait. Kramer understood immediately. He was asking permission to check on Wyatt without making it obvious. Granted, Master Chief, make sure everyone has water. Ortega approached Wyatt with 2 bottles, handed her one. You good, ma'am? She took the water, didn't drink. Define good, Master Chief. Fair point. He opened his own bottle, drank, providing cover for her to do the same if she chose. For what it's worth, I've been exactly where you are right now. Different circumstances, same feeling of everything coming apart at once. Does it get easier? No, but you get stronger. Wyatt drank finally, small sips, controlled. I didn't want this. I just wanted to work. Stay close to the mission without being responsible for lives. They pushed, and I tried to walk away, but there's nowhere left to walk. I know. Ortega's voice carried the weight of 24 years watching operators break under pressure no human should carry. But ma'am, respectfully, maybe walking away was never the answer. Maybe standing still was. Morrison's tablet chimed. Every head turned toward the sound like iron filings to a magnet. The JAG officer looked at the screen, face going carefully blank. Professional neutral that meant something significant had just appeared in his database. He looked at Wyatt, then at Kramer. Then, slowly, deliberately, he came to attention and rendered a full formal salute, holding it until Wyatt, moving like someone underwater, returned it. The remaining 40 personnel went absolutely still. Morrison's voice carried across the range, formal and final. Biometric verification complete through JPass. Identity confirmed. Clearance level confirmed at TS/SCI with multiple SAP authorizations requiring SOCOM commander approval to view. He paused, looked directly at Holloway. "Ma'am, the file indicates this individual's presence at this facility is classified under executive order. Personnel without proper clearance were not authorized notification of assignment details." Kramer nodded slowly. "Say it for the record, Commander. Full name and rank." Morrison took a breath. "Verified identity. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Marie Wyatt, United States Navy." The world tilted sideways. Reality rearranged itself around that single sentence. Kozlovsky made a sound like he'd been shot. Hammond sat down hard on a bench, head in his hands. Thompson looked like he might throw up. And Commander Derek Holloway, 41 years old, 12 years as a SEAL, executive officer of Training Command, stood frozen in the wreckage of his career and watched his future collapse in real time. Kramer's voice was cold enough to cause frostbite. "Commander Holloway, Senior Chief Kozlovsky, Lieutenant Hammond, my office, now." She looked at the remaining crowd. "Everyone else, this incident is classified. Anyone discussing details outside proper channels will face courts-martial. Dismissed." The range cleared like someone had pulled a fire alarm, leaving only Kramer, Morrison, her security detail, the three men about to lose everything, Ortega, Thompson, and Wyatt standing alone beside a rifle that knew her better than any person present. Kramer approached Wyatt, voice dropping to something almost gentle. "Commander Wyatt, I apologize. This should never have happened." Wyatt's voice was barely audible. "Permission to return to duty, ma'am?" "Which duty, Commander? Your actual rank and assignment, or the cover you've been maintaining?" "I don't know anymore, ma'am." Kramer studied her for a long moment. "We'll figure it out. But first, these three have some answering to do." She gestured to her security detail. "Escort them to my office. Commander Wyatt, you're not required to attend, but you have the right to be present for initial statements if you choose." Wyatt looked at Holloway, at Kozlovsky, at Hammond. Three men who'd spent 2 days treating her like garbage, who'd never considered she might have earned everything they took for granted and more. "I'll be there, ma'am." Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of 12 years, 8 deployments, and one impossible 14-hour firefight that had killed everyone she loved. The reckoning was just beginning. The walk to Admiral Kramer's office took 4 minutes. It felt like 4 hours. Holloway, Kozlovsky, and Hammond walked ahead, flanked by security personnel whose expressions suggested they'd seen this movie before and knew exactly how it ended. Wyatt followed at a distance with Ortega, who'd quietly positioned himself as her informal advocate without anyone officially asking him to. The NSW command building was newer construction, all clean lines and security checkpoints, the kind of architecture designed to project efficiency and authority. Kramer's office occupied the southeast corner of the 3rd floor, windows overlooking the Pacific. Inside, the furnishings were utilitarian government issue, except for one wall covered in photographs. Kramer with her helicopter crew in Desert Storm, Kramer receiving her Admiral stars, Kramer shaking hands with 3 different presidents. The message was clear. You don't reach this office without earning every inch of the climb. Holloway, Kozlovsky, and Hammond stood at rigid attention in front of Kramer's desk. Wyatt was offered a chair, declined, stood at the back of the room in a modified parade rest that was pure muscle memory. Ortega positioned himself near the door, present but not intrusive. Morrison set up a digital recorder, stated the date, time, and personnel present for the official record. His voice carried the practiced neutrality of someone who documented hundreds of these proceedings and would document hundreds more. Kramer remained standing, hands clasped behind her back, letting the silence stretch until it became physically uncomfortable. When she finally spoke, her voice was surgical in its precision. "Commander Holloway, you've been the executive officer of this training command for 4 months.
In that time, you've received 3 separate briefings about protected personnel assignments, 2 directives regarding anti-discrimination protocols, and 1 specific order about maintaining operational security regarding classified administrative placements. She paused. Do you recall those briefings? Yes, ma'am. Holloway's voice was tight, controlled. Then explain to me why Lieutenant Commander Wyatt, who was placed here under medical administrative review with explicit orders for confidential assignment, was subjected to public harassment, sabotaged equipment, and unauthorized weapons demonstrations. Ma'am, I wasn't briefed on Commander Wyatt's presence. The defense was weak, and Holloway knew it. You weren't briefed because I specifically excluded you from the notification loop, Kramer said flatly. Your record shows 3 EEO complaints in the past 18 months, all regarding inappropriate comments about integration policies. Your fitness reports note difficulty adapting to changing organizational culture. I made a command decision that you were not trustworthy with sensitive personnel information. The words landed like artillery strikes. Holloway's face flushed dark red. That decision, Kramer continued, appears to have been correct. Since the moment you encountered a woman in contractor coveralls, you immediately assumed incompetence and organized a public humiliation instead of following proper verification protocols. Morrison pulled up files on his tablet. Sir, base security logs show you requested background checks on Jay Wyatt twice in the past 11 months. Both times, the system returned standard contractor credentials with a flag indicating command-level clearance required for additional information. Both times, you did not follow proper escalation procedures. Holloway's jaw clenched. The flags weren't explicit about. The flags stated clearly that further inquiry required 06 authorization, Morrison interrupted. You are an 05. You did not have authority to pursue the matter independently, yet you initiated today's demonstration without consulting anyone in your chain of command. Kramer turned to Kozlowski. Senior Chief, what's your excuse? Kozlowski stood rigid, eyes forward, face pale. No excuse, ma'am. I followed Commander Holloway's direction without verifying proper authorization. You followed direction to harass someone you suspected had irregular clearances by forcing unauthorized weapons demonstrations? Kramer's tone could have stripped paint. At any point did it occur to you that someone with compartmented clearances might have legitimate reasons for being here that weren't your business? Ma'am, I thought she was committing fraud. So you decided to investigate personally instead of reporting to security through proper channels? Kramer shook her head. Senior Chief, you have 15 years of experience. You know better. This wasn't about security concerns. This was about ego and resentment that a woman demonstrated competence you found threatening. Kozlowski said nothing. What could he say? She was right. Hammond stood shaking slightly, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Kramer's gaze fixed on him with laser focus. Lieutenant Hammond, you recorded this entire incident on personal devices and posted portions to social media. Do you understand that filming training operations without authorization violates multiple base security protocols? Ma'am, I didn't think. Clearly, Kramer's voice was ice. You filmed a classified officer conducting weapons demonstrations, posted it publicly, and compromised operational security because you wanted social media content. How many followers is your career worth, Lieutenant? Hammond couldn't answer. His throat worked soundlessly. Morrison checked his tablet. Ma'am, preliminary review shows Lieutenant Hammond posted 3 videos to Instagram and TikTok before they were deleted by command security. Total views before removal, 47,000. Comments include speculation about classified programs, requests for facility location details, and multiple foreign language accounts showing unusual interest. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Posting videos that generated foreign intelligence interest was the kind of mistake that ended careers and sometimes resulted in criminal charges. Kramer turned to Wyatt. Commander Wyatt, you've remained silent through this. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Wyatt's voice was quiet, measured. Ma'am, I request that my statement be given separately and included in the formal record rather than spoken aloud here. Any particular reason? Because if I speak right now while looking at these three men, I won't be able to maintain professional bearing. The words were calm, but underneath ran a current of rage so cold it was nearly absolute zero. And they've seen enough.
Of my capabilities for one day. Ortega made a small sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Kramer nodded. Fair enough. Commander Morrison, arrange separate interview space for Commander Wyatt. She looked at the three men. As for you three, here's what happens next. She moved to her desk, pulled up files on her computer. Commander Holloway, you're relieved of your position as Training Command Executive Officer effective immediately. You will be assigned to administrative duties pending a board of inquiry. Charges being referred include Article 92, failure to obey lawful order regarding protected personnel. Article 93, cruelty and maltreatment. Conduct unbecoming an officer. The board will convene in 30 days. Holloway's career was over. Everyone in the room knew it. Boards of inquiry into O5 misconduct rarely end in anything but forced retirement, usually at reduced rank. Senior Chief Kozlovsky, you're hereby reduced to Petty Officer First Class under non-judicial punishment authority. You'll be reassigned to Non-Operational Support Battalion pending completion of mandatory EEO training and psychological evaluation. Further disciplinary action remains under review. Kozlovsky had just lost 15 years of advancement in 15 seconds. His face was gray, expression devastated. Lieutenant Hammond, you receive a punitive letter of reprimand in your permanent record. You're removed from operational teams and reassigned to administrative duties. Additionally, NCIS will be investigating your unauthorized recording and posting of classified facility operations. Depending on their findings, you may face criminal charges under the Espionage Act. Hammond looked like he might pass out. All three of you are restricted to base pending completion of these proceedings. You're dismissed to your quarters. Security will escort you. The security personnel moved forward. Holloway started to speak, thought better of it, remained silent. Kozlovsky looked at Wyatt once, opened his mouth, closed it. What could he possibly say? Hammond was crying silently as they were escorted out. When the door closed, Kramer sat heavily in her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 51 years. Commander Wyatt, off the record for a moment. Wyatt's posture relaxed fractionally. Ma'am, this is my fault. I placed you here without adequate protection protocols. I assumed your cover would hold because I underestimated how aggressively some personnel would react to perceived outsiders. I'm sorry. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Granted. This was going to happen eventually. Maybe not here, maybe not these specific men, but somewhere. Someone was going to push until something broke. Wyatt's voice carried exhaustion that went bone deep. I've been hiding for 11 months, trying to heal, trying to process what happened in Helmand. But you can't heal from something by pretending it didn't happen. I needed to stop running. Ortega spoke quietly from the door. Ma'am, if I may, Commander Wyatt handled this situation with more restraint than most operators would have shown. She could have identified herself at any point, used her rank to shut down the harassment. She chose not to because she was following her medical orders to avoid confrontation. Medical orders she received because of PTSD from losing her entire team. Orders that were supposed to protect her and instead created a situation where she had no defense against harassment. Orders weren't wrong, ma'am, Wyatt said. The people were. And now they'll face consequences. That's all I wanted. Justice, not revenge. Morrison looked up from his tablet. Ma'am, there's another issue we need to address. Commander Wyatt's cover is now completely blown. Minimum 40 personnel witnessed her identity reveal, and more will learn through unofficial channels. We can't put this back in the box. Kramer nodded slowly. No, we can't. Which means we need to decide what comes next for you, Commander. She looked at Wyatt. Your medical review isn't complete. You're not cleared for operational duties. But you can't go back to equipment services like nothing happened. What are my options, ma'am? Several. You could request transfer to another facility under your actual rank. You could transition to training command as an instructor, teaching advanced weapons and tactics. You could take terminal leave and separate from service. Kramer paused. Or you could stay here, continue your recovery, and let me figure out how to use your talents without putting you back in situations that trigger your PTSD. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. Finally, "I need time to think, ma'am. Everything just changed in the span of 2 hours. I'm not ready to make career decisions yet." "Fair enough. Take 72 hours. We'll reconvene Friday morning and discuss your options." Kramer stood, moved around her desk. "For what it's worth, Commander, what you did today took more courage than most combat operations. Standing there while they mocked you, when you could have destroyed them with a word. That's a kind of strength most people never develop." "It didn't feel like strength, ma'am. It felt like drowning. Sometimes they're the same thing." Morrison closed his tablet. "Ma'am, I'll need Commander Wyatt's formal statement for the record whenever she's ready. Tomorrow morning is fine. Commander Wyatt, you're dismissed. Get some rest. Master Chief Ortega, make sure she actually leaves the base and doesn't spend tonight in that warehouse." Ortega nodded. "Aye, ma'am." They left Kramer's office, walked through corridors that suddenly felt different, like Wyatt was seeing them for the first time, without the protective camouflage of anonymity. Personnel who passed them did double takes, recognition sparking in their eyes. Word had already spread. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost absurdly beautiful after the day's chaos. "Master Chief," Wyatt said quietly, "thank you for having my back in there." "Nothing to thank me for, ma'am. Just did what was right." Ortega paused at the parking area. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Those 7 operators you lost in Helmand, when you're alone in that warehouse every night, are you maintaining their equipment because it helps you heal, or because you're punishing yourself?" Wyatt was silent for so long, Ortega thought she might not answer. Finally, "Both. And I don't know how to stop." "Maybe you're not supposed to stop. Maybe you're supposed to transform it into something else." He gestured back toward the command building. "You just taught 40 operators a lesson about judgment and respect they'll never forget. That's leading too, just from a different position. You sound like a therapist, Master Chief. 24 years watching good operators break themselves on guilt they didn't earn. You learned some things." He handed her a card with a phone number. "That's my personal cell. You need anything, day or night, you call. That's not a suggestion, Commander. That's an order from someone who outranks you in years and experience, even if not in grade." Wyatt took the card, held it like it was something precious. "Aye, Master Chief." She walked to her car, a 10-year-old sedan that screamed anonymity, and drove away into the California evening. Ortega watched until her taillights disappeared, then pulled out his phone. The message he sent to 3 other Master Chiefs he trusted was simple. "We've got an operator in crisis. She needs a support network. I'm activating the chain." Within 5 minutes, all 3 responded with variations of "Roger that." Because that's what you did for operators who'd held impossible positions, who'd sacrificed everything, who'd earned the right to be caught when they fell. You built a net underneath them, and hoped like hell it was strong enough when they finally let go. The formal interview took place at 0900 hours the next morning in a secure conference room with soundproofing and electronic countermeasures that ensured absolute privacy. Commander Morrison sat across from Wyatt with his recording equipment, a legal pad, and the patient expression of someone who'd conducted hundreds of witness statements. Admiral Kramer was present as observing authority. Ortega sat in the corner, officially listed as senior enlisted advisor, unofficially there to make sure Wyatt didn't have to face this alone. Morrison started the recording, stated the date and time and personnel present, then looked at Wyatt. "Commander Wyatt, this is your opportunity to provide a complete statement regarding the events of the past 48 hours. Take whatever time you need. Everything said here is protected under investigation confidentiality."
Wyatt had spent the night not sleeping, staring at her apartment ceiling, trying to organize 12 years of service and one catastrophic operation into words that would make sense to people who hadn't been there. She'd finally given up around 0400 and just started writing. The document she slid across the table was 11 pages, single-spaced, organized with military precision. Morrison skimmed it, eyebrows rising progressively higher. "This is extremely thorough, Commander." "I'm good with after-action reports, sir. Had a lot of practice." He read in silence for several minutes. Kramer watched Wyatt, not the document, studying her face for signs of the trauma that lay underneath the professional bearing. Finally, Morrison looked up. "Commander, I need to ask some questions for the record, even though your written statement is comprehensive. First, regarding your assignment to Equipment Services, can you explain the circumstances?" Wyatt's voice remained steady, clinical. "Following Operation Silent Thunder in March 2023, I was medically evacuated from Helmand Province with 3 gunshot wounds, shrapnel injuries, and acute psychological trauma. I spent 4 months at Walter Reed undergoing physical rehabilitation and psychiatric evaluation. Diagnosis included PTSD, survivor's guilt, and what the doctors called moral injury from losing my team." She paused, drank water from the bottle in front of her. "By August 2023, I was physically cleared but psychologically unfit for operational duties. The psychiatric board recommended gradual reintegration through non-combat assignments that kept me connected to the mission without direct operational responsibility. Equipment Services at Coronado was suggested as occupational therapy. Working with the gear, maintaining weapon systems, it was supposed to help me process my trauma while staying mission-focused." Morrison made notes. "And your rank and clearances were deliberately obscured." "Yes, sir. The psychiatric evaluation indicated I needed anonymity during recovery. Being recognized as the Ghost 6 survivor created expectations and attention that interfered with healing. Admiral Kramer authorized the contractor cover to give me space to recover without the weight of my history." Kramer spoke for the first time. "Commander, for the record, that decision was mine alone. If it was wrong, the responsibility is mine." "It wasn't wrong, ma'am," Wyatt said quietly. "It gave me 11 months of relative peace. That's 11 months more than I thought I'd get." Morrison continued. "Walk me through the first incident with Commander Holloway, when he initially approached you in the warehouse." Wyatt recounted the events with the precision of someone trained to remember tactical details. Times, positions, exact words spoken, physical descriptions. Morrison's pen moved steadily across his legal pad, documenting everything. "At any point during that first encounter, did you consider identifying yourself?" "Yes, sir. Multiple times. But my medical orders were explicit about avoiding confrontational situations. Revealing my identity would have been asserting authority, which would have created confrontation. I chose compliance with my recovery protocols over defending my ego. Even when the harassment escalated? Even then, sir. I kept believing it would stop if I just stayed quiet and did my job." Her voice carried something like bitter amusement. "Turns out silence looks like weakness to certain personality types." Morrison moved through the timeline methodically. The vandalism, Hammond's energy drink incident, the forced weapons demonstrations. Wyatt answered each question with the same clinical precision, like she was describing operations that had happened to someone else. Then Morrison reached the range demonstration. "Commander, you performed significantly above SEAL qualification standards on multiple weapon systems. Some observers noted your technique matched DevGru methodology rather than standard team training. Can you explain the difference?" Wyatt was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. "Standard SEAL training focuses on proficiency across multiple domains. Development group training focuses on perfection in specific skill sets. The shooting technique I demonstrated came from 2 years of advanced training at a classified facility, followed by 8 operational deployments where those skills were applied under combat conditions. Applied how? I've participated in 118 direct action missions across 7 countries, sir. Precision shooting under stress became automatic because the alternative was mission failure or friendly casualties. She met Morrison's eyes. The technique they saw yesterday wasn't me showing off. It was muscle memory from situations where anything less than perfect meant people died. The room was very quiet. Ortega's expression hadn't changed, but his hands had tightened fractionally on the arms of his chair. Morrison consulted his notes. The 800-meter engagement with the Mk-13. You calculated environmental factors and called your shot before firing. That's extremely advanced fieldcraft. Yes, sir. I've made that specific shot in combat conditions. Yesterday's demonstration was actually easier
because no one was shooting back. The statement landed with absolute flatness. No bravado, no emotion, just fact delivered like a weather report. Kramer leaned forward slightly. Commander, I need to ask about Operation Silent Thunder. I've read the classified after-action reports, but I need your perspective for this investigation. What happened that day? Wyatt's hands tightened on her water bottle, the first visible crack in her composure. She was quiet for nearly 30 seconds, breathing carefully controlled. Ma'am, my team was conducting direct action against a high-value target in Helmand Province. Intelligence indicated light resistance, quick in and out. Intelligence was wrong. Her voice remained level, but something behind her eyes went very far away. We hit the compound and walked into a prepared ambush. Reinforced Taliban battalion, over 200 hostiles, coordinated fire from multiple positions. She stopped, swallowed hard. My team leader, Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Wright, age 34, took the first rounds. He died instantly. Then Petty Officer Marcus Sullivan, 29. Then Lieutenant James Reston, 31. Then Senior Chief Philip Brennan, 37. Then Petty Officer Rachel Kim, 27. Then Petty Officer Andrew Torres, 26. Then Petty Officer First Class David Harrison, 33. The names came out like liturgy, like prayer, like something she'd recited so many times they'd worn grooves in her soul. 7 operators dead in the first 4 minutes. I was the 8th member, positioned at Overwatch 200 meters out. I had the choice to extract or to protect the classified intelligence materials my team had secured before the ambush. She met Kramer's eyes. I chose to hold position. For 14 hours, through 3 separate assaults, while wounded, because that's what my team would have done for me. You eliminated 42 hostile combatants in that engagement, Morrison said quietly. Yes, sir, I counted. I remember every single one. Wyatt's voice was still flat, but her hands were shaking now. Some people think killing gets easier. It doesn't. It just becomes necessary. And afterward, you carry all of it, every face, every shot, every decision that kept you alive while better people died. Ortega spoke from the corner. Ma'am, you can take a break if you need to. No, Master Chief, let's finish this. Wyatt turned back to Morrison. The psychological evaluation after Helmand concluded I have what they call survivor's guilt combined with moral injury. I don't believe I deserved to survive when my team didn't. I don't believe the intelligence I protected was worth 7 lives. And I don't believe I'll ever not hear their voices when I close my eyes at night. She took a shaky breath. That's why I was working equipment services. Maintaining weapons, checking gear, making sure everything was perfect. Because if I couldn't save my team, at least I could make sure someone else's equipment never failed them. It was the only service I could still give without breaking completely. The silence in the room was profound. Morrison had stopped taking notes, just watching Wyatt hold herself together through sheer force of will. Kramer's voice was gentle. Commander, what those 3 men did to you over the past 2 days, how did that affect your recovery?
Wyatt laughed, sharp and bitter. Ma'am, they made me remember I was still capable. That despite everything, despite the trauma and the guilt and the nightmares, I could still
execute at the highest level. They meant to break me, and instead they reminded me I'm not as broken as I thought. She wiped her eyes roughly. So, in a weird way, maybe I should thank them, though I won't because they're still assholes. That startled a laugh from Ortega, quickly suppressed. Morrison gathered his notes. Commander, final question. What outcome are you seeking from this investigation? I want them to understand what they did wrong, sir. I want them to learn that you don't judge people based on appearance or assumptions. I want the junior operators who witness this to know that respect is earned through observation, not granted through prejudice. She paused. And I want them punished proportionally, not destroyed, not vindictively, just held accountable for violating regulations and basic human decency. That's a very measured response, given what you experienced. I've killed people, sir. I've watched friends die. I've held positions that should have been impossible to hold. Wyatt's voice was quiet, but carried absolute conviction. After all that, petty revenge against 3 men who made bad choices seems beneath me. I just want justice, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen to the next person. Morrison stopped the recording, closed his legal pad. Commander Wyatt, thank you for your statement. It will be included in full in the investigation record. Kramer stood, moved around the table. Commander, I need you to understand something. What happened to you wasn't just harassment. It was command failure at multiple levels, starting with me. You were placed in an impossible situation and handled it with more grace than anyone should have to demonstrate. Ma'am, with respect, I don't feel graceful. I feel tired. That's because grace under pressure is exhausting, Kramer said. Take the rest of the week off. That's an order. We'll discuss your future assignment on Friday, but until then, you're on administrative leave. Rest. Process. Let yourself feel whatever you need to feel without worrying about maintaining military bearing. Wyatt stood, came to attention. I am. One more thing, Commander. Kramer's expression softened slightly. What you did in Helmand Province, holding that position for 14 hours, protecting classified intelligence while wounded and alone, that's why the Navy Cross recommendation is still pending. The review board has been waiting for you to be psychologically stable enough to attend the ceremony. I'd like to move forward with that in the next 60 days, if you're willing. Wyatt's face went carefully blank. Ma'am, I don't deserve. That's not your decision, Commander. That's mine, and SOCOM's, and the review board's. You held an impossible position and completed an impossible mission under impossible circumstances. That deserves recognition, whether you believe it or not. Wyatt said nothing, couldn't say anything, just nodded once, sharp and controlled. Ortega walked her out of the building, down to the parking area, where early morning sun was burning through coastal fog. They stood beside her car in silence for a moment. You did good in there, ma'am, Ortega said finally. That couldn't have been easy. None of this is easy, Master Chief. But I'm starting to think easy isn't the point anymore. What is the point? Wyatt looked back at the command building, then out at the ocean, then down at her hands. Hands that held rifles and saved lives and taken lives and couldn't quite stop shaking. Survival isn't enough anymore. I need to figure out what comes after. What it means to still be here when they're not. She met Ortega's eyes. And maybe how to let other people carry some of this weight instead of trying to shoulder all of it alone. That's called healing, ma'am. Is it? Feels more like surrender. Sometimes they're the same thing, too. The consequences came swiftly and without ceremony. By Thursday afternoon, the entire base knew the details. Not officially, of course, but through the military grapevine that operated faster than any classified communication system. Commander Derek Holloway was seen clearing out his office at 1600 hours, escorted by security, carrying a single cardboard box that somehow represented 12 years of service.
His face was gray, aged 10 years in 3 days. He'd tried to fight the Board of Inquiry, had hired a civilian attorney, had made calls to every contact he'd cultivated over his career. None of it mattered. The evidence was documented, witnessed by dozens of personnel, and recorded on multiple devices before security deleted them. The board convened on Wednesday. By Thursday, the recommendation was formal: retirement at reduced rank, commander to lieutenant, loss of approximately 40% of his pension. The alternative was court-martial. Holloway took the retirement. He saw Wyatt once during his final out processing, across the parking area. Started to approach, thought better of it. Just stood there, looking at her like he wanted to say something. Wyatt waited, gave him the opportunity. He opened his mouth twice, closed it both times, finally just walked away. Some apologies were too late to give and too empty to receive. Senior Chief Kozlovsky, now Petty Officer First Class Kozlovsky, took his reduction in rank differently. He'd reported to Admiral Kramer's office at 0800 Monday morning, stood at attention, and said simply, "Ma'am, I have no excuse. I was wrong. I let personal bias override professional judgment. I failed to uphold the standards I claimed to represent." Then he'd asked permission to apologize to Wyatt directly. That meeting happened Tuesday morning in a conference room with Ortega present as witness. Kozlovsky stood across from Wyatt, no longer wearing the anchors of a senior chief, looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with rank insignia. "Commander Wyatt, I owe you an apology that words can't adequately convey." His voice was steady, but his hands were clasped tight behind his back, knuckles white. "I spent 15 years as a SEAL. I deployed to combat zones where my life depended on trusting my teammates regardless of background or appearance. And the moment I encountered you in a context that challenged my assumptions, I threw all of that away." He took a breath. "I harassed you. I sabotaged equipment you were supposed to use. I questioned your integrity and your competence based on nothing but the fact that you were a woman in coveralls doing a job I didn't think was important enough to respect." His jaw tightened. "I was everything I claimed to hate. I was the weak link, the operator who let bias compromise the mission." Wyatt listened without expression, letting him finish. "I don't expect forgiveness," Kozlovsky continued. "I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I understand what I did wrong. And I'm going to spend whatever's left of my career making sure no one under my influence ever repeat my mistakes." He met her eyes finally. "You're a better operator than I'll ever be, ma'am. I'm sorry."
It took losing my rank to learn that lesson. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 15. Wyatt studied him with the intensity of someone assessing whether words matched intention. "Petty Officer Kozlovsky," she said finally. "Apology acknowledged. Not accepted, not yet, but acknowledged. You want forgiveness? Earn it. Be better. Teach better. Make sure the next generation of SEALs judges people by capability, not appearance." She paused. "You were a good operator. Don't let this be the end of that. Let it be the beginning of being a better human." Kozlovsky nodded once, sharp. "Aye, ma'am. Thank you for that much." He left looking like a man who'd been given a path forward, even if it was steeper and harder than anything Buds had thrown at him. Lieutenant Hammond's consequences were both harsher and more public. The NCIS investigation concluded that his social media posts, while deleted quickly, had generated foreign intelligence interest. His videos had been downloaded and shared on Russian and Chinese military forums, with specific attention paid to facility layouts visible in the background. No classified information was definitively compromised, but the potential was significant enough to warrant federal charges. Hammond's JAG attorney negotiated a plea agreement, guilty plea to mishandling classified facility information, dishonorable discharge, 6 months in military prison, felony record. Hammonds requested to apologize to Wyatt. She declined. Some people needed to learn lessons alone, and Hammond had never shown genuine remorse, only regret at consequences. There was nothing to be gained from that conversation. Word of his sentencing spread through the base in hours. The reaction was mixed. Some operators felt it was excessive. Most felt it was proportional. You don't post operational facilities online and expect to keep your career. The broader impact rippled through Naval Special Warfare Command like a depth charge. Training materials were updated. EO briefings became mandatory quarterly instead of annually. A new protocol was implemented for handling protected personnel assignments, with explicit guidance that unclear clearances required immediate chain of command notification, not independent investigation. 3 other officers quietly received letters of counseling for past discriminatory behavior that had gone unaddressed. Admiral Kramer made it clear through official channels and unofficial conversations. The culture was changing, and anyone unwilling to adapt should start planning their exit strategy. On Thursday afternoon, Wyatt received an unexpected visitor at her apartment. Petty Officer Second Class Tyler Vance stood at her door in civilian clothes, looking nervous and determined in equal measure. "Commander Wyatt, ma'am, I apologize for showing up unannounced. Master Chief Ortega said it would be okay to contact you." Wyatt studied the young SEAL, 24 years old with earnest eyes and the slight uncertainty of someone still figuring out what kind of operator he wanted to become. "Petty Officer Vance, you tried to speak up during the warehouse incident. I remember." "Yes, ma'am, and I didn't speak loud enough or strong enough, and I've been thinking about that every day since." He shifted weight, uncomfortable but pushing through it. "Ma'am, I wanted to ask if you'd consider mentoring me, not officially, just occasionally. I want to learn how to have the kind of courage you demonstrated, the quiet kind, the kind that stands firm without escalating." Wyatt. It was silent for a long moment. She'd spent 11 months avoiding exactly this kind of connection, this kind of responsibility. But Vance had tried to help when it mattered, even if his attempt had been ineffective. That counted for something. "I'm not cleared for operational duties, Petty Officer. I can't teach tactics or fieldcraft." "That's not what I'm asking for, ma'am. I need to learn how to be an operator with integrity, how to stand up when it's uncomfortable, how to judge people by who they are, not what I expect them to be." His voice was quiet but determined. "The SEALs taught me how to fight. I need someone to teach me how to think." Wyatt felt something shift in her chest, some small locked door opening fractionally. "I'll make you a deal. I'll answer questions when you ask them, offer perspective when it's appropriate. But I'm not taking responsibility for your development. You're responsible for that. I'm just a resource you can access when needed." Vance's face lit up. "Yes, ma'am, that's all I'm asking for." "And, Petty Officer, one piece of advice right now, no charge. Speaking up when everyone else is silent takes practice. Start small. Correct small injustices. Build that muscle before you need it for big ones. By the time you're in a situation like the warehouse, the choice to speak up should be automatic." "I, ma'am, thank you." He left looking like someone who'd just been handed something valuable. Wyatt watched him go and felt the unfamiliar sensation of having given something meaningful without it costing her everything. Friday morning arrived gray and cold, coastal fog thick enough to taste salt. Wyatt reported to Admiral Kramer's office at 0900 as ordered, uncertain what decision she'd reached about her future. The past week had been a blur of statements, interviews, and quiet moments alone, trying to process the fact that her carefully constructed anonymity was gone forever. Kramer's office was warmer than Wyatt expected. Coffee waiting, 2 chairs positioned for conversation rather than confrontation. Ortega was present again, invited this time rather than self-appointed. "Commander Wyatt, thank you for coming." Kramer gestured to the coffee. "Help yourself. This is a conversation, not a briefing." Wyatt poured coffee she probably wouldn't drink, sat in the offered chair, waited. "I've spent the week consulting with medical officers, reviewing your service record, and thinking about what's best for you and for naval special warfare." Kramer sipped her own coffee. "Here's what I've concluded. You're one of the most skilled operators this community has produced. You're also dealing with significant trauma that won't be resolved quickly or easily. Those 2 facts need to coexist in whatever comes next." She set down her cup. I'm offering you 3 options. First, medical retirement with full benefits and honors. No stigma, no questions, just recognition that you've given enough and earned the right to step away. Wyatt nodded slowly, the expected option. Second, transfer to instructor duties here at Coronado, teaching advanced weapons and tactics to SEAL candidates, staying connected to the mission without operational deployment. It would require continued psychological evaluation and gradual reintegration protocols. That option was harder. More responsibility, more exposure, more risk of failure. Third, and this one's unusual, I want to create a new position, Equipment and Weapons Systems Advisor to NSW Command. You'd continue working with gear, but a higher level. Consulting on acquisition decisions, testing new systems, providing operator perspective on equipment development. You'd work regular hours, maintain appropriate boundaries, and have access to mental health resources as part of the job description. Kramer leaned forward. Commander, that third option is me trying to meet you where you are. You've said working with equipment helps you heal, so let's make that official, respected, and valuable to the community. You'd have real influence over systems that keep operators alive, and you'd do it without the pressure of operational command. Wyatt stared at her coffee, mind working through implications. Ma'am, that position doesn't exist. It will if you accept it. I've already cleared it with SOCOM. They're very interested in having your expertise accessible for equipment decisions. Ortega spoke quietly. Ma'am, if I may, that third option gives you what you've been doing, but with recognition and resources. No more hiding, no more pretending to be someone you're not. Just being exactly who you are, trauma and all, and letting that be enough. Wyatt looked up at him, then at Kramer. I don't know if I can handle people knowing about Helmand, about Ghost 6, about all of it. The attention, the expectations. Then we manage it, Kramer said simply. We control the narrative. We make it clear you're in a specialized advisory role, not available for interviews or public appearances. We protect your privacy while using your skills. It's possible, Commander, if you want it to be. The silence stretched. Outside, fog was beginning to lift, revealing blue sky and Pacific Ocean, and a world that somehow kept turning despite everything. I want option 3, Wyatt said finally. I want to stay connected. I want to work. I want to make sure equipment doesn't fail the next team the way intelligence failed mine. She met Kramer's eyes. But ma'am, I need continued therapy. I need support systems. I need people who understand I'm going to have bad days where I can barely function. All of that comes with the position, non-negotiable. Then, yes, ma'am, I accept. Kramer smiled, genuine warmth breaking through command bearing. Outstanding. Welcome to your new assignment, Commander. You start Monday. Regular hours, real salary grade, office with a door that closes. She paused. And Wyatt, thank you. For staying, for fighting, for showing this community what strength actually looks like. Wyatt left the building an hour later with paperwork, a new badge, and something that felt almost like hope. 3 weeks later, the warehouse looked the same but felt completely different. Wyatt arrived at 07:30, no longer wearing contractor coveralls, but proper Navy working uniform with Lieutenant Commander insignia visible on her collar. Her new office occupied a converted storage room adjacent to the main equipment area, walls now painted navy gray, desk positioned so she could see both the door and the window, workspace organized with the precision of someone who needed external order to manage internal chaos. The sign outside read, Equipment and Weapons Systems Advisory Office, LCDR J. Wyatt, NSW Command. She was making coffee when the first knock came. A young SEAL, maybe 22, fresh-faced and nervous, carrying an M4 carbine with obvious feeding issues. Ma'am, sorry to bother you. Master Chief Ortega said you might be able to help diagnose a malfunction we've been fighting for 2 weeks. Wyatt set down her coffee, took the rifle, performed a function check with practiced ease. Magazine well was slightly out of spec, causing feeding angle problems. 15-minute fix with proper tools. Bring it back at 1400 hours. I'll have it corrected. The SEAL's face lit up like she'd just solved world hunger. "Thank you, ma'am. Really, we've been fighting this thing through 3 quals." He left, was replaced 10 minutes later by an instructor with questions about optics selections for night operations. Then a senior chief requesting consultation on new suppressor systems. Then a lieutenant asking about cold weather lubricant options. By 1100 hours, Wyatt had fielded 8 separate requests and realized something fundamental had changed. People were coming to her not despite who she was, but because of it. Her expertise was valued, her experience was respected. The coveralls and anonymity were gone, but what remained was something more solid, more real. At 1200 hours, she took lunch in the base cafeteria for the first time since her assignment began 11 months ago. Sat at a corner table with her back to the wall, old habit from too many combat zones. Petty Officer Vance spotted her, approached hesitantly. "Ma'am, permission to join you?" "Granted, Petty Officer." He sat, they ate in comfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, Vance spoke. "Ma'am, there's a female candidate starting BUDS next month, first woman to attempt it since the integration policy opened slots. She's already getting comments from some of the instructors. Nothing official, just the kind of doubt that wears you down. And you want to know what I think you should do about it?" "Yes, ma'am." Wyatt considered her response carefully. "I think you should judge her exactly the way you judge any candidate. If she fails standards, she fails. If she meets them, she advances. Don't give her special treatment, and don't accept anyone giving her special obstacles." She met his eyes. "The standards exist for a reason. Trust them. And if you see someone violating them to push her out, that's when you speak up. Some of the senior guys say women don't have the physical capability. Some of the senior guys said the same thing about me, right up until I held a position for 14 hours that most of them couldn't hold for 1. Wyatt's voice was quiet but carried absolute conviction. Physical capability is distributed across a spectrum. Some women can meet the standards, some can't. Same as men. Judge individuals, not categories." Vance nodded slowly, processing. "Thank you, ma'am. That helps." After lunch, Wyatt returned to her office to find an unexpected visitor. A woman in civilian clothes, mid-30s, ID badge showing she was a contractor with a defense equipment manufacturer. She stood quickly when Wyatt entered. "Commander Wyatt, I'm Jennifer Moss with Tactical System Solutions. Admiral Kramer suggested I consult with you about a new rifle platform we're developing for NSW evaluation." The meeting lasted an hour, technical discussion about barrel harmonics, gas system optimization, weight distribution. Wyatt found herself engaged in a way she hadn't been in months, her expertise valued, her input shaping decisions that would affect operators for years to come. This was impact without operational command, influence without the weight of immediate life and death responsibility. It felt sustainable in a way combat never had. At 1600 hours, Ortega appeared in her doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you might need this. Heard you've been slammed."
Lammed all day. Word travels fast, Master Chief. Always does. He sat in the visitor chair, handed her the coffee. "So, how's the new position treating you?" "Honestly, better than expected. I'm useful. People value what I know. And I get to leave at 1700 and go home to an apartment instead of spending nights alone in a warehouse convinced I'm failing everyone. That's called progress, ma'am. Is it? Still feels fragile, like one bad day could shatter everything." Ortega was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something I learned after Fallujah? Healing isn't linear. You don't fix yourself and stay fixed. You have good days and bad days. And slowly, the ratio shifts. More good, less bad. But the bad days never disappear entirely, and that's okay. They're part of the cost of having done things that mattered." Wyatt held her coffee, let the warmth seep into her hands. "Do you still have bad days, Master Chief, after 24 years? Every week, ma'am. Every single week, I wake up at 0300, hearing sounds that aren't there, seeing faces I couldn't save. The difference is, I've learned to live with it instead of fighting it. The memories are part of me now. Heavy, but mine. How do you carry it?"
By sharing the weight. That's what support systems do. That's what this place can be, if you let it. He gestured around the office. You've got Vance coming to you for advice. You've got operators requesting consultation. You've got Admiral Kramer watching your back. You've got me answering questions at lunch. He smiled slightly. You're not alone anymore, even if it still feels that way sometimes. Wyatt felt something tight in her chest loosen fractionally. Thank you, Master Chief, for everything. For seeing me when I was trying to be invisible. For standing up when it mattered. For still checking in when the crisis is over. That's what we do for each other, ma'am. Operators taking care of operators. After Ortega left, Wyatt worked until 17:30, finishing maintenance on the M4 she diagnosed that morning. She could have left at 1700, probably should have. But there was satisfaction in completing the work, in knowing that rifle would function perfectly for the operator who depended on it. At 1745, she locked her office, walked through the warehouse one final time, checking that everything was secured properly. Old habits, good habits, the kind that kept people alive. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The air smelled like salt and possibility. Wyatt stood in the parking area, keys in hand, looking back at the building that had been her sanctuary and her prison. A group of SEAL candidates jogged past, formation run, voices calling cadence. Among them, near the back, but keeping pace, was a woman. Shorter than most of the men, compact build, determination visible in every stride. The candidate Vance had mentioned, probably, starting her impossible journey. Wyatt watched until they disappeared around the building. Wondered if that candidate knew how many people were watching, waiting for her to fail. Wondered if she'd succeed anyway, despite the doubt and the obstacles and the weight of being first. Then Wyatt got in her car and drove home, because she couldn't carry that candidate's burden any more than anyone could have carried hers. Everyone had to walk their own path, fight their own battles, find their own strength. But maybe, if that candidate needed advice or perspective or just someone who understood, Wyatt would be there. Available, present, contributing in the only way she knew how, by being honest about the cost and the value of refusing to quit. At home, Wyatt's apartment was small but comfortable. She'd finally unpacked the boxes that had been stacked in the corner for 11 months. Photos on the wall now. Her team, ghost team, 7 faces frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. She'd avoided looking at those photos for almost a year, couldn't bear the weight of their eyes. Now she stood in front of them, touched each face gently. Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Wright, Petty Officer Marcus Sullivan, Lieutenant James Reston, Senior Chief Philip Brennan, Petty Officer Rachel Kim, Petty Officer Andrew Torres, Petty Officer First Class David Harrison. "I'm still here," she said quietly to the photos, to herself, to the darkness that never quite left. "I don't know why it was me who survived. I don't know if I deserve it. But I'm trying to make it mean something. I'm trying to honor what you gave by giving what I can." The photos didn't answer. They never did. But somehow, speaking the words aloud made them more real, more possible. Her phone buzzed. Text from Ortega. "Tuesday morning, 0600, coffee at the base Starbucks. Admiral wants to discuss new equipment acquisition proposal. Your input requested." Wyatt typed back, "I'll be there." 3 words, simple affirmation. But underneath was commitment to showing up, engaging, contributing, to being present in her own life instead of haunting it like a ghost. She made dinner, something simple, ate while reading technical specifications for rifle optics, showered, changed into comfortable clothes, settled into her couch with a book she'd been trying to read for 3 months. At 2200 hours, her phone rang. Unknown number. She considered ignoring it, answered anyway. "Commander Wyatt?" Female voice, young, uncertain. "This is Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell. I'm the candidate starting BUDS next month. Petty Officer Vance gave me your number. He said if I ever needed advice from someone who'd walked an impossible path, you might be willing to talk. Wyatt was quiet for 3 seconds, choosing her response. She could deflect, maintain boundaries, protect the fragile peace she'd built. Or she could answer honestly and accept that healing sometimes meant helping others walk through fire you'd already survived. Petty Officer Mitchell, I'm willing to talk. What do you need? Honestly, ma'am, I'm terrified. Not of the physical standards, I can meet those, but of being the first, of carrying everyone's expectations and everyone's doubts simultaneously, of the weight of either succeeding or failing publicly. Wyatt remembered standing in that warehouse, harassment escalating, wanting to disappear into anonymity, but knowing that eventually you had to stand and be counted, visible and vulnerable and absolutely yourself. Here's what I learned, Wyatt said quietly. You can't control other people's expectations or doubts. You can only control your own effort and integrity. Show up every day. Do the work. Judge yourself by standards that matter, not by the noise around you. And remember that being first means your walking point for everyone who comes after. That's heavy, but it's also honor. Did you feel that way during your career, ma'am? That being one of the first women in Tier 1 operations meant carrying extra weight? Every single day. And some days it almost broke me. But Mitchell, here's the thing. The weight of being first is temporary. Eventually, there are enough of us that it becomes normal. Your struggle clears the path for the next candidate who has a slightly easier time, who clears it for the next. That's how change happens, one impossible journey at a time. They talked for 20 minutes. Wyatt shared what she could without violating classification. Mitchell asked smart questions, took the answers seriously. When they finally disconnected, Wyatt felt exhausted but not empty. Tired from giving, but in a way that felt purposeful rather than draining. At 2300 hours, she lay in bed, light off, waiting for the nightmares that came most nights. Sometimes they were Helmand Province. Sometimes they were variations, losing different teams in different ways. Sometimes they were abstract, formless dread that left her gasping awake at 0300. Tonight, they didn't come. Instead, she slept 8 hours straight, dreamless and deep, and woke at 600 to sunlight streaming through her window and the realization that for the first time in 11 months, she'd made it through the night without seeing their faces in the darkness. It wouldn't last. Tomorrow or next week, the nightmares would return. The PTSD didn't disappear because she'd had one good week. Healing wasn't linear, like Ortega said. But this morning, this singular morning, she felt something close to peace. Wyatt made coffee, got dressed in her uniform, checked that her new office keys were in her pocket. At 0730, she arrived at the warehouse that was no longer a hiding place, but a workspace. Her office, her equipment, her mission. Admiral Kramer was waiting outside with Ortega, both holding coffee, both smiling slightly. "Commander Wyatt, good morning," Kramer said. "We wanted to catch you before your day got busy. SOCOM officially approved your position this morning with full funding and staff authorization. You're no longer a provisional advisor, you're permanent command asset." "Thank you, ma'am." "There's more. They want you to testify before the Senate Armed Services Committee next month. Equipment acquisition hearing. Your perspective on what operators actually need versus what contractors promise." Kramer's expression was carefully neutral. "It's voluntary, high visibility, could be difficult given your PTSD and preference for anonymity, but it's also significant influence over decisions that affect thousands of operators." Wyatt looked at the warehouse, at the ocean visible beyond the base buildings, at her hands that still carried calluses from weapons and scars from combat. Thought about Mitchell starting buds, about Vance learning courage, about operators she'd never meet who would carry equipment she'd helped design. Thought about 7 faces in a photograph, 7 names she recited like prayer,
7 people who'd given everything while she'd somehow survived. "I'll do it, ma'am. For them." Kramer understood immediately. For them. And Commander, for you too. You deserve to use your voice for something that matters. The sun climbed higher, burning through morning fog, revealing a world that was complicated and painful and occasionally beautiful. Wyatt walked into her office, set down her coffee, and began the work of being present in her own life. It wasn't easy. It never would be easy. But some things were worth the difficulty. Some things were worth showing up for, day after impossible day, until slowly, gradually, the weight became bearable and the mission became clear. She was still here, still fighting, still finding ways to serve. That was enough. For today, it was enough.